Hello, my name is Tony. After I used the term rogue male as the subtitle for my review of Timothy Dalton Bond movie License to Kill, my thoughts turned to Geoffrey Household's 1939 novel of the same name, and the 1976 BBC teleplay. This was the most accomplished screen version of the novel, the previous incarnation being the 1941 Fritz Lang directed Hollywood flick Manhunt, with Walter Pidgeon headlining. The 76 iteration had the utterly wonderful Peter O'Toole in the lead. I'd seen it only once on TV, and that was the year it was first screened. I later caught up with it on DVD in 2007 when it was released by a company called Alpha Home Entertainment. I have no idea who Alpha Home Entertainment are or were, but their idea of entertainment seemed to include rolling out a version of Rogue Male that was filmed on a cheap camcorder held by someone with cerebral palsy, pointing it in the general direction of the one-off TV broadcast running on an old 70s Rediffusion set. Then digitizing that footage and slapping it out on a DVD, shit transfer, and then some. Or maybe they used a home-taped VHS copy of the original broadcast as a master. Of course, they could have paid the BBC for the rights to reproduce it from their recording, but as the corporation banned the film from being shown again indefinitely, I feel that unlikely. Why did the BBC stamp on it in such a way, I hear you cry? Or not? Doesn't fucking matter. I'm gonna tell you anyway. Even though it was a low-budget affair funded by TV license payers' money, the Beeb felt it could make a fast buck by releasing it theatrically as a feature film. Not so fast, said everyone involved in the making of it. You didn't pay us feature film rates when we worked on it. If you're gonna bang it out in the cinemas, you're gonna cut us in on the deal? Well, interestingly, the BBC's leftist bias in its programming, commissioning and corporate ideology was swinging into action big time in the 70s. Not as all-out eclipsing as it is now, but a good start. You know, all that up the workers, down the government, inclusivity, fair crack of the whip, social conscience, equality and diversity for all, that stuff. All well and good, but despite their talking the righteous talk, they walked it way differently. They shouted, "Fuck off," took their rogue male-shaped rugger ball and kicked it into the long grass. There, they smugly proclaimed, there it will stay and never be seen again, so fuck you and your anticipated royalties from repeats. See how you like them bananas, you obstructive militant bastards. Nowadays, of course, just about everyone involved in the making of Rogue Male 76 is dead, which may explain why, with little or no fanfare, the BBC struck a deal with the British Film Institute in 2019. This allowed them to access the original 16mm negatives in their archives, which the BFI then scanned at 2K resolution and shoved out on Blu-ray, meaning there's a decent copy available I was previously unaware of. Now I'm aware of it, and in receipt of it I can review it. Here we are then. It's early 1939, in the days before Britain was at war with Nazi Germany. Toothless goat Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was busy sucking Adolph's dick in appeasement. Political relations between the two countries were delicate though. Chamberlain came back from his dick-sucking exercise with a piece of paper. Well done, that was worth it then. Game hunter Sir Robert Hunter, Peter O'Toole, a man with one of those surnames that does what it says on the tin, is stalking through the Bavarian countryside with a high-powered rifle. He settles some distance from a chateau and aims at the people partying outside. In his telescopic sights, he alights on one Adolph Hitler. He fires and the rifle dry clicks. He contemplates briefly, then loads a live round and fixes on Hitler again, at which point he's interrupted and captured by two Gestapo goons on patrol. Savagely beaten and tortured by an SS interrogator, Michael Byrne, face bruised and bloodied, fingernails unceremoniously torn out, he continues to claim it was an intellectual exercise, a sport in stalk to see if it could be done. There was no actual intent to assassinate the dictator for real, he insists. The interrogator doesn't buy it, believing Hunter is an agent of the British government. However, because of his high social status and what with negotiations between Britain and Germany being at a critical stage, it's decided that to avoid a political scandal and considering Hunter shows some rather suspicious physical signs of torture, his death, his execution, will be made to look like an accident. They dress him in his hunting garb, take him to a cliff top and throw him off. Problem is, despite being seriously injured, Hunter doesn't die from the fall. The interrogator realizes this when he and his men return later to fake the discovery of his body. He manages to crawl to a nearby river, slump in and float downstream. Being an expert on hunting and surviving in the wild, he's written a book on the subject. Hunter lays low for a few days, healing to a partial extent. He's lucky enough to stumble across a sympathetic local fisherman with a hatred for the Nazis. He provides Hunter with a change of clothing, some provisions, and allows him to take his rowboat. Hunter makes it to a seaport. There he finds the authorities are on the lookout for him. Evading them, he convinces the first mate of a British merchant ship to hide him on board, and in a couple of days he disembarks back in England. His troubles, though, are far from over. Visiting his elderly uncle, the Earl Alistair Sim, at a Turkish bathhouse, he learns that he is a wanted man. The Earl is one of those shadowy Whitehall types, a deceptively doddery upper-class member of the government, probably a linchpin of the espionage community, one of those old boys no one can really pin down to exactly who he is or what he does. The Nazis want Hunter extradited back to Germany to stand trial for the attempted assassination of the Chancellor. Neville, as the Earl calls the Prime Minister, Neville Chamberlain, suggesting they're on first-name terms, is considering it. The Earl's largely unhelpful advice is to lay low, keep out of sight, and hope it all blows over. Not that easy, as Hunter is certain he's under surveillance and being followed by people with malicious intentions on their minds. Deciding to make a run for it and drop off the radar, he visits his friend and solicitor Saul Abrahams, Harold Pinter. Abrahams, a Jew, is no fan of the Nazis for obvious reasons, and provides Hunter with a full money belt to fund his disappearance. Followed into the London Underground by a Nazi agent, Hunter is unable to shake the man who pursues him with a gun. He manages to throw him onto the electrified rail, killing him, and catches a train bound for Dorset. Now he is wanted for the murder of the fried fascist. Once in the familiar countryside, Hunter goes underground, literally. He locates a hollow lair in the earth and holes up there, visiting the local village only for supplies. Unfortunately for him, 2 more Nazi agents have managed to track him down to the general area. Major Clive Smith, John Standing, a fellow British hunter and traitorous Nazi sympathiser, and his German henchman, Muller, Ian East. Ambushing Hunter on a nocturnal visit to a stream to fetch water, Clive Smith shoots him, but luckily it's only a flesh wound. When a wild cat Hunter has befriended distracts the 2 men, Hunter escapes back to his lair. It's not long before Clive Smith tracks Hunter to his hiding place and, cutting off his access and exit points, imprisons him within. Left with only a breathing hole in his remaining provisions, Hunter is trapped in the earth. Using the breathing hole as a communication portal, Clive Smith informs his quarry that his plan has changed. He will spare Hunter's life if he signs a declaration confessing that he attempted the assassination of Hitler on the orders of British intelligence, a revelation which will effectively lead to war. Muller shoots the wildcat and his corpse is shoved down the breathing hole along with the declaration to be signed. Now, with no way out and only a dead cat and his conscience for company, how can Hunter possibly survive, let alone prevail? I'll get into the how part later, but for now, some completely subjective and very biased analysis, something you regulars will be used to, I dare say. It looks old, hammy as a ham hock, budget compromise, small scale, reeks of televisual mothballs, and is technologically a relic. Even in '76 it looked a touch antiquated, and I fucking loved it. I loved it when I first saw it, grieved for decades that the BBC put a block on my seeing it again, and yes, I did take that personally, you fuckers. I loved it when I got the lousy DVD release, and I loved it even more when the Blu-ray dropped into my lap recently. Wisely, director Clive Donner and screenwriter Frederick Raphael deviate from Household's novel to mirror Fritz Lang's Manhunt in specifying the identity of the dictator in the crosshairs and giving the anonymous protagonist a name. Therefore, the context becomes more powerful, more politically charged and resonant. It's filmed in that direct, dead-eyed, very technically unshowy way most BBC 70s screen dramas were back then. Quite play for today in feel, but the period setting is decently realised. The mountains of Wales don't convince much as stand-ins for the Bavarian Alps, but the London and Dorset locations have an authentic pre-war look and feel. There's a dog-eared, expressionistic realism to it all that, whilst not exactly visually and sonically invigorating, does make for some edgy atmospherics. The residual grain in the Blu-ray transfer contributes a bit more. Peter O'Toole, when asked by Francine Stock in a radio interview in 2007 which of all his films was his favourite, claimed it was Rogue Male. And he does seem to be having a lot of fun, hamming it up with the arch theatrics and then channeling pained instants of quiet pathos and vulnerability, as well as firing off some barbed epigrams and insults in the literate manner of the entitled and privileged. His contempt for his torturers, his moral superiority, crumbles though as the pain intensifies and he sheds tears that run through the blood and wounds on his anguished anguished face. O'Toole is a mesmeric watch, upper-class eccentric, but with a knowing twinkle in his eye, stiff upper-lip heroics and steely resolve present and correct. There are occasional flashbacks to his time with Rebecca, Sid Heyman, the love of his life. She was an activist against the Nazis who was executed in Germany by firing squad. Hunter experiences intense guilt that he didn't do enough to save her and prevent her death. Knowing this suggests that the assassination attempt was something more than merely an Englishman's experimental folly of frivolous theoretical game, even though Hunter's actual motives remain ambiguous in the narrative. In his last screen appearance, veteran British character actor Alistair Sim is a sheer delight as Hunter's deceptively obtuse uncle. The Earl is in fact a perspicacious old fucker, a wily political player who's been haunting the corridors of power long enough to know what's what and where things are heading. He conveys genuine affection for his nephew, and his advice to hide out and sit tight might not be as impotent and inadequate as first thought to be, considering how future events unfolded. Wonderful moments his interaction with O'Toole, and quite poignant, this last showing by a living, breathing touchstone of British classic cinema. At least he finished in some style. John Standing is malevolently suave as the hissable villain Clive Smith. Nothing quite so reprehensible as a collaborator, utter filth of the earth you ask me. He's British through and through in taste and habit. He quaffs a pint of English ale with lip-smacking relish, whilst his underling Muller clearly finds the drink repugnant. And yet he's still a stinking traitor to his country. He can't understand why a man of apparent breeding like Hunter isn't keen to sign up to Hitler's cause, to embrace fascism. The answer is simple. Hunter is a humanitarian at heart, a patriot who loves his country and the people in it. Nobel Prize-winning playwright Harold Pinter makes the most of his role as Hunter's Jewish solicitor and friend. Abrahams is a deeply troubled man, already haunted in advance by the pending cataclysm in Europe he knows is coming. He knows history and the history of his people, and therefore knows what's on the way. More persecution, more death. Resigned, saddened, all he can do is give Hunter any help that he can. It's quite a sensitive portrayal, and marks Pinter out as a surprisingly capable screen performer. Rogue Male is like a well-worn and much-loved keepsake. You see the age on it, the wear and tear, the flaws, the lack of sheen and shine, and yet they are the things that give it much of its charm and power. It is not slick, not glib, not a high-octane thriller-minute rollercoaster ride. It's a gentler and more genteel proposition, veined through with a slow burn of uneasy escalating tension. You could be excused for thinking it an expanded version of a stage play by Noel Coward or Agatha Christie. It's not, but it gives that general impression. Or of being the sort of thing Hitchcock could have made as a companion piece to the 39 Steps back in his early days. So what then becomes of Sir Robert Hunter? Trapped underground with a dead cat, having conversations with himself, his tormentors with the upper hand. If you want to know, I'll tell you. If you don't, stop watching and listening now, you dope. With a wooden board and brick combo he was using as a shelf for his lair, Hunter starts fashioning something. He skins the dead cat and stretches some of the pelt over the crude apparatus. He applies a long metal nail. He has constructed a rudimentary ballista, a makeshift crossbow. Clive Smith has sent Muller on an errand. Hunter speaks to him via the breathing hole, conceding that he will sign the confession in return for his life. Clive Smith is beside himself with glee at this victory, to the very point where he looks triumphantly down the breathing hole in anticipation of seeing Hunter's face in crestfallen defeat, which is when Hunter fires his contraption, sending the metal nail up the breathing hole, penetrating right between Clive Smith's eyes, killing the bastard stone dead. Hunter digs himself out and retrieves Clive Smith's rifle. He waits for Muller to return. The man begs for his life. Hunter forces him to bury the Major in his lair and then drive him back to London in the Major's car. Sometime later, the Earl is still in the Turkish bathhouse as distant sirens begin to wail. Hunter arrives and is told by his uncle now that war has been declared, he is in the clear. Additionally, Winston, first name terms again, wants to see him at the Admiralty. Might have a job for him, a position so to speak. The film closes with Hunter travelling to the Admiralty to meet with a man who will soon be Britain's wartime Prime Minister. It's fucking great. It's possible I'm the only one in the known universe who thinks this, but little do I care. Cheap or not, well, it was cheap. It drips with an indefinable juice of style and class that cannot be replicated these days. And it's as wacky as a March hare on a cosmic skateboard orbiting the moon with a live electric eel glued to its balls. I can imagine a lot of people who've seen it previously or have seen it recently for the first time might pause to wonder what I'm on. So what? Any film that contains the following lines of dialogue delivered with such peerless panache by Peter O'Toole would alone be enough to elicit my dedication. When accused of being an agent of British Foreign Office intelligence, Hunter responds indignantly, absolutely not. There's been very little sign of intelligence in the British Foreign Office for a very long time. When the interrogator demands to know how Hunter got to the chateau in Bavaria, he tells him he walked. From where? Poland. Poland? That's over 200 miles away. I've got a good bootmaker. Sneyd in Crivet Street. See? Style and class. Over 40 years later, in 1982, Household, Never One to Let the Grass Grow published a sequel. Rogue Justice sees the protagonist working undercover in Germany for British intelligence. Keep meaning to get a copy and read it, but I feel he might have been rushing things to capitalise on the success of the first one. Hope it's not a carelessly dashed off, shamelessly cynical cash-in, that's all. In 2016, a planned remake starring Benderbatch Cumberdick was announced. 8 years later, and nothing. No picture, no sound. Can't say I'm particularly sorry. One less classic piece of entertainment for modern Hollywood to rape up with their Oscar-shaped plutonium cock of wokery. Gotta be grateful for that, right? If they do make it though, I just hope they cast Sydney Sweeney as Ava Braun and RuPaul as Adolf Hitler. All that's left to say is if you give it a spin because of this review, you'll either hate me or you won't. Could go either way. If you hate me already, it won't matter. If you don't, well, it still won't matter. With that in mind, the choice is yours. It always is. But I just thought I'd say it anyway so that you know I know. You know? Thank you, I'm truly grateful for your time and attention. Do whatever you want to do next, hit like, don't like, comment, subscribe, be a patron on my Patreon thing, make a financial contribution via the thanks button. I will be back with something I wasn't sure about doing next. I'm still not sure it was all that good an idea, but time inevitably will tell.